A very good evening to each and every one of you present here. In an incredibly difficult time, I think Manavotsav is doing a very great job at making our lives slightly better across the South Asian community. When we feel better, we make this world a better place to live in. And these times are all about perseverance and the effort we put in into making this world slightly more livable. I find it a great privilege to be able to join this session on children, theatre, and wellness on behalf of Team Elixir, which is a trilingual digital magazine based in Kolkata, bringing together more than 400 young artists and writers for the last 3 years, giving them a space to express themselves. The magazine has evolved into an audiovisual space for young performers of the city during the lockdown. I take this opportunity to welcome you to this session with two very eminent speakers, Professor Monica Lakhanpaul, Professor of Integrated Community Child Health, UCL, and Vice Provost South Asia Director at Childhood Infections and Pollution Consortium of UCL. She will be talking about children wellness in pandemic times. We are very proud to have you on board, Doctor. Also joining us this evening is Ramanjit Kaur, an international award-winning theatre and film director and actor. She will be talking about theatre and its impact on children. She's also the founding director of the Creative Arts, the main aim for which is offering theatre training and exploring the various genres of theatre. Thank you very much for joining us this evening, ma'am. Without further ado, I will move on to starting this session with a small question, which I will first direct to Professor Monica, and then we will slowly go ahead with more questions and live interactions. So during the pandemic, most of us as adults, we have been terrified. In fact, we've gone very steadily from being terrified to scared to slowly accepting the reality that we are facing right now. So I'm sure it has been more difficult for the children. And those with children at home, it has been all the more difficult. So I have a question which basically has three parts to it. So firstly, how has COVID-19 affected the health of children? And what exactly are the greatest concerns of parents regarding the health of their children? And the third part of the question is, how will the parents, or what will the parents do to make things better for the children out there?
Thank you very much. And firstly, thank you for inviting me to this session. It's an honor to be here on behalf of my colleagues and on behalf of all of you here. I want to try and address some of those questions in probably an integrated way rather than as separate questions. As you say, this pandemic has been very, very difficult from everybody. Most people have never been through this in their lifetime, and we hope we'll never go through it again. It's had impact in three main ways. One is really around the physical health for the child. One is around the emotional health and well-being of the child. And the other is around the learning. And again, all of these can't really be separated. They can't be separated at all. If we take first the physical, because that's probably the most straightforward to start with, we've been locked down. You know, the governments have told us we have to stay inside, we have to be locked down. That really means that we don't have very much space. People live in very small places, very small houses, some in apartments. The lucky ones may have a garden, but that's very few in the whole population around the world. And what that means is whether you're a toddler, whether you're in primary school, whether you're in secondary school or an adolescent, the space around you is influencing what you can do. So if you cannot run around, if you can't stretch your legs, if you can't do exercise, that has an impact on your growth, on your muscles, on your development. So a toddler who would normally go out into the park, run around, chase around, suddenly their legs can't be utilized as much as they would normally. An adolescent, the same way, would go and exercise, but their legs and their muscles can't be used. So one is around the physical side and the well-being from the physical side. This then has a knock-on effect, as you can imagine, on nutrition and obesity and putting on weight. Now, let's think of it in two ways. There are people in this lockdown who we know have put on a lot of weight, and that's because access to food has been easier. Sometimes it's difficult to cook. You don't all have access to kitchens so easily. So you cook quick food that may be not as nutritious as it was. And then on top of it, you're not running around. So children putting on weight has been a big issue that we're going to have to consider because in the Asian community, we have higher risk of heart disease, higher risk of diabetes, And this is the youth who are going to have a risk of the future. On the other side, we have children who are living in poverty. And COVID, the pandemic, has actually made this divide between the people more well off and the people in poverty much bigger than it probably was before.
Yes.
So people can't really access food. Some people are having malnutrition. We know that some children around the world are more wasted than they were before. Children were getting school meals, midday meals, school meals. Those have gone away. And that means that the nutrients that they're getting, such as iron, may not be what they would normally get. So we have to be wary of the nutritional deficiencies that some of these children are also having. All of that, with then you're inside the house, if we take nutrition as where I'm going with this. So vitamin D, I'm sure many of you have heard about vitamin D. Vitamin D is you find it in food, but you also need sunlight for vitamin D. So if you're locked down within a house, you're not getting access to the sunlight, you're not getting vitamin D because you need sunlight to convert into vitamin D. And then you get what many of you may have heard about, rickets, brittle bones, teeth being brittle, and again, a knock-on effect. So if you can see what I'm saying is it's affecting your brain because you need good nutrients for your brain to grow. It's affecting your well-being from your bone growth. Your brittle bones are more possible, and also your muscles. So everything is being affected in this sort of way. So that's the physical and nutritional side of it. We can come back to some of this in a bit more detail, and there's probably things I've missed, but we can come back to that. Then if we move to more the emotional well-being. Now, again, children there's a few things we have to consider. One is they're more isolated. They're not in school. Normally you would be with your peers, you would be playing, you would be de-stressing. And it is, you go to school to de-stress. You're not suddenly with friends, you're not talking, you're not interacting, you're with your parents, your family, your grandparents all of the time. You have no privacy if you're an adolescent, and every time you talk to somebody's in the back of you and they can hear what you're saying. Your privacy is gone completely. Your parents are stressed because of either jobs, emotional stress, marital stress, and that then has another knock-on effect on you because you're hearing a lot of the fear of, are my relatives going to be alive? Is somebody going to be ill? What's going to happen to my parents? Children absorb information, and sometimes we're not aware of how they're absorbing that information. So on the surface, fine, but then underneath, they're suddenly hearing all of these different things and the impact on them. Increased anxiety, we're seeing, eating disorders, depression, all of these things that are happening to young people at the moment. And this is all age ranges, right up until the adolescence. And that's scary if we don't recognize that in young people, really scary. And then the third big area is learning. So many children have been taken away from their educational support systems, whether you're children who have learning disabilities, whether you're children who are in the normal environment, you are not accessing learning and education. So we have a group of children who now, for the future, are not learning in the same way many children would have been. And what does that mean to them? And then we have two other areas, which I'm sure parents will be aware of, is one around sleeping. We know that lots of children are not sleeping well, whether this be anxiety, whether this be change of routine, whether this be because they're not running around, so they're not tired.
Yeah.
And the other problem that we get asked about from parents is children on the computers the whole time. And what effect is that? And again, we can come back to talk about that. But computers, digital technology has really increased good things and bad things. Good because it means they can connect with their peers. Bad things because of bullying. And with bullying, they're more likely to get depression, anxiety. But then what happens to the children who don't have access to digital technology? That we have this digital divide again, where some children have no access to anybody. And it's sad to say, we do know that there have been children who've been maltreated, children who've been abused, and nobody can hear their voices. And I think what's quite worrying about this time is, how do we hear the voices of children? So all of these things I'm saying, physical health, emotional health, well-being, anxiety. One thing we have to think of as parents, and I'm a parent of 3 children and I have a big family, is what's that mean for how we connect with our children as parents? Are we hearing their voices? Are we talking to them? Are we putting routines in the day? Are we so absorbed in what we're doing because we're trying to survive in our jobs or everything we're doing, that we're actually with our children the whole time, but we're not with our children, if you see what I mean. We're not actually connecting with our children. So it's a very positive time in the way that if we have utilized this time to connect and spend time with our children, it's a wonderful opportunity. But we also have lots of pressures on us as well, which may mean that we don't hear those little voices when they're trying to tell us that they're worried or they're scared or they want to speak to us. The other problem we have is that children, we know, are not accessing healthcare as they were. So globally, many children are missing their routine health surveillance. So mothers have not been going for antenatal care. And globally, we know that we've been really pushing the fact that women need good antenatal care to bring healthy children into this world. We know children have been affected in that way. Children aren't getting their immunizations. Globally, a whole host of children are now missing their immunizations, putting them at risk not only of COVID, but all the other infections out there. So there's all these secondary consequences of what's happening. Some, when they're ill, are not seeking the help of doctors. So they're getting other illnesses where normally they would have seen somebody, and now they're not seeing anybody. So there's a huge number of secondary consequences. So as we come out of this pandemic, we're going to have children who've been affected in so many ways, and we're very focused, which we have to be, on the now, but we really need to think, what about the future? And how do we work with the children to make them healthy for the years ahead of us?
Thank you so much. I think that was a very, very comprehensive answer. And it covers a lot of questions that we had, as some of us as children, some of us as parents, some of us as simply people who are surviving this pandemic. Which brings me to two specific questions for you, Professor Monica. And I think this is something that has gone a huge transformation during the pandemic. Recreation for children, which you were talking about. And since there are no outdoor activities and children are already spending a lot of time on the computer, so they're spending around 6 to 7 hours in school, plus they have private tuitions. So what about recreation? Do they go back to video games? Do they go back to television? Or is there an alternative space that we can create for our children?
So, and I'm sure Ramanjit will talk about this as well when it comes to theatre and the arts. But I agree completely. I think it's easy to put a TV on. It's easy to put a video game on. It keeps the children busy. Children like connecting with their friends through video games. But actually what we've realized is that it's really important for children to engage with the creative arts as well. Their mind develops through interaction, and your brain develops, your neurons connect more when you're interacting more and you're painting or you're doing sticking things onto paper. And there's this two-way interaction with you and your child. So it's very hard for parents, and I understand it's very hard for parents, and trying to juggle everything and cook and everything else and clean the house and everything is a nightmare. But it's very, very important that what I suggest to people is have a routine in the day. Have a routine which is your mealtime. Have a routine which is time when you do allow your children to be connected with their friends, because that's really important. But find a space in the day when you take the children away from that. The digital turns off, the computers turn off, you have some quiet time, and you have some way of either reading books, because they're not reading books at school. It's quite interesting how quickly children can forget to do these things. They're not drawing anymore, so get the pens out, get the creative arts out, get the painting out. That's actually quite hard for some families, because like I've said, children often go to school because there's a space where they can be dirty. There's a space where they can paint. There's a space where they can throw everything around. And the house sometimes isn't that space. So it's a new way of working for some parents, not all, but it's a new way of working for some parents, where we have to find a space in the house, whether it's, in a corner somewhere or whether it's on a chair, it doesn't matter where it is. The idea is that the children, A, are able to express themselves, B, are utilizing their hands. We talk about gross motor and fine motor development. Really important that children are using their hands, they're using their brains, they're thinking about things, and they're translating their thoughts into their hands and being creative. And that's easy to forget about how important that is. The other secondary consequence of this, which is actually interesting for some parents, is you'll learn a lot about your child that way. So some children who are have anxiety or have fears draw, and they may not be able to draw the most beautiful, picture in the world, but it doesn't matter. They draw what they're thinking. And it's a very good way of not just giving the creative arts to children and this space away from digital platforms, but a way to actually see what your child is feeling or thinking, where the child feels safe and it's a little bit easier for you to sort of see what's happening. So get them to draw, are they feeling happy? Are they feeling sad? What are their experiences during that day? How have they been feeling about the world? And you'll see just from the pictures that they draw, some of the little messages that you can pick up. And then as a parent, you can take that into a conversation. And then, what we do say is positive feedback is very important for children. It's easy at the current time to get into some negative feedback. Children are shouting and it's tiresome for the parents, and you get into a very negative way of behaving, of shouting and telling children off. By doing this sort of creative arts, what it allows us to do is stop for a while, take some time out, and then give positive feedback to children. Children learn much better and develop much better when they have positive feedback than negative feedback. And again, I understand the challenges of being a parent, but this way of using the arts allows you to do that because you can be very positive about what your children have done with you. So it has a dual effect: development, learning, connection with family and parents, but also a positive relationship that can be brought back into the home as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, on the same question, I now come to the lady who has been working extensively with children during the pandemic, Ramanjit Kaur, and who has her own young army who has been, they have been brilliant during this pandemic. So, will you tell us whether you agree on this, creating an alternative space for recreation, and what role do you think theatre would play in this particular space?
Thank you, Shinjini, for that question, and thank you, Monica, for explaining everything, one step by after another, and it was very comprehensive. So, looking at this whole situation initially, I thought that I will be able to, not do anything. But there are so many children who are dependent on us, and we have to kind of look after what happens to them, even if there's a crisis. So after 1 month of not doing anything, we started our classes online, and I must say that there's been a lot of creative work that has been going on. Sorry, at the same time I was messaging my daughter that my battery is running low, come fast. So uh, the fact is that this is a square, and all the issues that Monica has very rightly pointed out are the issues that the children are facing. So the question was not just creating something as you would do in a classroom, but also it is, how do you negotiate with this screen? The screen where they are engaging for 6 to 7 hours, as it has been pointed out. So how do you move them away from the screen and also help them create? So we've been able to devise a whole lot of new exercises and games that we've been doing with the children. So let's say that we're sitting right here on the screen, but all the creation we tried not to do in front of the screen. So all the exercises and games that theater brings to the plate have been redesigned to explore all the spaces in the house. So many corners that you have, so many stories coming out of each and every corner, places and relationships that you may not have explored and you would like to explore now, the diaries you may not have visited, the books that you may not have visited. for so many years, and you've been wanting to, write and scribble and do art and craft and indulge in creating some poetry, some music, some dance. And if there are mentors or facilitators that are guiding you through it in even exploring these stories, so then it becomes a very joyful experience. So we've ended up, we have this international festival coming up, and the theme itself is environment and empathy. So, how it came across that we are facing this COVID-19 situation, and what have we done to the environment? Have we consumed more than our share on this planet Earth? Have we been very greedy? Have we eaten up the space that belonged to other species? Why this havoc? Because we've been very, very careless. So, do we need to rethink and redesign our lives even post COVID-19? So, all those discussions had to happen, had to begin, and they have. Apart from that, what each individual is feeling away from their friends, their peers, their relatives. Are they feeling lonely? Are they able to engage through this space? And if they are engaging, how best can they engage? How can this space become warm? How can you even touch each other through this space? Is there an energy that emanates through this space? Does it cut across borders of this space? Can you feel it? So all those questions, and also talking about, if you're feeling a certain way, how are we going to negotiate? If you're feeling online fatigue, how are we going to negotiate with that? Now, coming to the question of, this is about, what we are going through, the online space, and being cut off with our very physical life. Coming to a point which is extremely important, that how does theater help in mental wellness? That is something that really concerns us at the creative arts. All the artists in the world, the theater artists or any other artist, will tell you that art really heals. And it does, because it is connecting to your heart, it is connecting to your emotions, it is connecting to you, it is connecting to your thoughts, your feelings, to everything that identifies you. And then you express it. It is your expression. So definitely when you are expressing yourself, it is healing. You're connecting with this one person who you should know the best. So now coming to how it helps us create relationships. Once we know ourselves the best, that is a very good space to start a relationship with another human being. And also there are a lot of tools and ways and means to create this beautiful bridge between one human being to other, more acceptance that it's all right if so and so has a certain weakness, because I may have a B weakness and another C will have a C weakness. Qualities are another thing that we need to focus on. So all these things theater slowly and slowly inculcates within us. How do we even look at life? How do we look at ourselves? How do we look at others? And how do we look at our environment? Having said that, the theater itself also creates a very safe space for us to express ourselves. Any of the theater forums, people feel very safe expressing themselves, coming out with their darkest of secrets. Not that you're sitting and you're sharing that, oh, this is what happened. It is done in a very cathartic manner. There are a lot of tools and ways and means which bring out catharsis from you. And keeping all these things in mind, we have this international theatre festival coming up, which is called Ramebazi. It starts on Monday with 4 webinars talking about arts and education, performance, pedagogy, and practice, arts and education, curating and creating, creating arts leadership through legal awareness, and talking about new art forms that are defining our contemporary age. And then we have events and workshops from by artists from 7 countries that are going to share puppetry, song, music, dance, storytelling, all these things with you, filmmaking, online. And it is going to be very vibrant. So you're not going to feel the online fatigue. There is baking, and it's baking with love. 1 cup of sugar and 2 cups of love. So even baking we have intertwined with storytelling. There's poetry. So also a lot of youth organizations have created this very beautiful space for you to come and talk during this festival. One is No Norma, who are conducting It Is Okay to Be Not. And that is where we are. That is where Manav Utsav is. That is where Sangeet Foundation in UK is. That is where the creative arts is. That's the initiative that De Montfort University is taking to say that if you're not feeling okay, do not say I'm fine. It's all right if you tell the other person that I am not feeling all right or something is upsetting me. And for the other person who's listening, it is important for them to know that let us not judge, because in another moment we may be feeling the same way. So it's so important to just listen and not judge the other person. And having said that, there's another organization, Top Notch, who are talking about where do I belong. It's about immigration. It's about people who've moved away. Monica, her ancestors moved away. Shinjini is in another place and not in her hometown. I have moved away from Chandigarh to Kolkata. So if you feel that only moving from Chandigarh to UK or USA is a migration, I feel moving from Chandigarh to Kolkata is leaving your homeland and is a migration for me. So what happens to people when they get displaced? Do they ever belong? And even if the people who are living in their homeland, do they ever belong? There's a beautiful dialogue in our production, Beyond Borders, which says, you can be a refugee in your own home just because you think differently. So my urge to everyone is that let's not make each other feel like a refugee just because we think differently. So it's these kind of issues that Top Notch will discuss in Where Do I Belong? Then there's Anir's Poetry, who brings in a lot of poetry with empathy. There is Berg Originals, who are doing a lot of stuff in terms of talking to each other. There's a podcast that Michelle, Sunil Bhandari, and Jimmy Tangri are bringing up, which is talking about eavesdropping and confessions. So it is again about confessions. Now, the reason that so many events are being curated around it is to say that we are in it together. Let's talk. And whatever we talk, whatever we say, it is all right. That's where we are right now. You muted, Shinjini.
So absolutely, that is absolutely a wonderful approach. And I think that should be the basic idea behind anything that we are organizing now, because it is very important that we are there for one another and we make sure that we hear each other out. And of course, what you say is so correct that, when you practice art, when a child practices art specifically, it helps in engaging with the parents and it helps the parent to understand him or her better, because he might not be able to express himself vocally or verbally. He might not be able to go up to his parents and say that I'm facing this trouble. So, and on that note, a parent expresses a very, very grave concern, and he says that, what do I do if my child wants to eat chocolates all the time and not food? So I think, Professor Monica, would you like to take up
Yes,
that question?
yes, I think that would be good.
Thank you. It's an interesting question, and it's a question that I think lots of parents come across and lots of challenges parents come across. It's not just chocolate. What is it if my child wants to do something and I don't want them to do it? Basically, it's the same sort of thing. The first question is this a new thing? Is this a question related to something that's happened during the pandemic, or is this something that has been there for a long time? The reason I'm separating the two is because if it's something that's been there a long time pre-pandemic, then this is a behavior that the child has got into, really, of thinking that chocolate is good. Maybe it's been used as a positive a feedback mechanism. Maybe it's been used as a reward. Chocolate's always nice. It tastes nice. It feels good. Everybody wants it. To avoid having chocolate, it takes control. And you, as an individual, have to have control, which children don't have. They're always going to go for what they like. The parent's role is having to put that control mechanism in. And so if it's pre-pandemic, the question is, is this a long-term behavior pattern? Has this been going on? How do you break that pattern? If it's during the pandemic, is it something that is new? And there's two reasons this could be. One is because you're in the house and you're locked down and it's easy to get to the chocolate and feel comfortable and access the chocolate. The other is it because there's something else going on in the child's emotions that they're using chocolate or going to chocolate for comfort? So let's just tease that a little bit apart. So we know that chocolate in itself is wonderful, but it's bad for your teeth. It means the child will eat chocolate and not other food. It fills your stomach up. A little bit as a reward is always good. And using chocolate so that children learn rewards and what a reward is actually quite a good mechanism. You give something to somebody all the time, it's not a reward. They don't understand the difference. You give it all the time, they're going to get the nutrient deficiencies, they're going to get the iron deficiency, they're going to get bad teeth, they're going to get caries. So what do you do? The question was, what do you do as a parent? The question is, and it's hard. If a child has got into a behavior pattern that every time I cry or every time I misbehave, I will get the reward, the chocolate, they're going to carry on. It's actually a bit of a hard thing. One is you can do it the soft way. Every time the child asks for a chocolate, you then give something else as an alternative. So think of something healthy that you can introduce slowly as an alternative. That takes time. It takes repetition. You have to keep doing that. You have to keep doing that so that the child relearns how we compare to other food. If that doesn't work, or if you want to do it in an alternative way, actually you have to throw the whole chocolate out of the house. And that's a much harder thing to do, but it actually is quite effective. But it takes resilience. You need to be strong as a parent. You throw it all out, the child will scream, the child will shout, the child will fight. But if you can't access something, you can't have it, and that's it. And then you slowly introduce other positive foods and other positive rewards that are helpful. That's a general answer. If it's during COVID, again, I'd say throw all the chocolate and bad food out, because everybody's, and that does mean for the parents. The other issue here is parents have to unite with children. You can't show preferential treatment to one child against another, against a parent. So if a child sees the parents eating chocolate and denying the child chocolate, you're giving mixed messages. So either you all do it or you hide and do it, basically. But if it's something new and the child's behavior has also changed, then start thinking, is this alarm bells? Is there something going on that the child is worried about? And I bring this up mainly because it may not answer the direct question, but it's actually very important in that eating disorders we know have increased. And children through anxiety, depression, worries, watching digital technology of people on stars on the TV, etc., eating disorders has increased. So there are some children who, while they've been at home, and we have data for this, have been eating and then having eating disorders. So they will binge on chocolate and then they will go and do something else to get rid of the chocolate. So just be alert, So try and tease it apart. Long term, is it in the pandemic? Is it due to healthy eating behaviors? Is it due to something else that's underlying the issue? And is it a change in behavior?
Right. Ramanjit, would you like to add something to that?
Yes. I would like to, that's very well analyzed. And I would like to add one small thing over there, few readings and experiences. That is, one is the physical craving. A lot of things happen when there's a division of outside and inside world, and then we are just locked inside, and the body is not getting enough physical exercise. So there's a lot of things happening physically to our body. That is one thing. But there's loads that is happening mentally. And I feel that even though the parents and the children are locked in a house, the parents are struggling to work. And it's not just office work, but it's a lot of household work because everyone is together and there's a lot of meals and a lot of things that have to be done, which were different when we were all working and going to school. So the question is that maybe even though we are together, we are still craving for each other's time because there's so much on our plate and we are unable to finish it in a day. So I feel that sometimes these cravings, I mean, this is just another added reason to what all Monica has said, that these cravings come from insecurity, come from wanting to connect to you, wanting to reach out to you. So you throw a tantrum or you try to do something that will catch the other person's attention. So another suggestion would be to try and gauge, is it coming from that space? Is it coming from the space of reaching out to you? Is the tantrum related to so that they get your attention? So what are you going to do with that? You have this busy schedule, you cannot leave it. A suggestion would be that if you create some deals, if you create a schedule where you say that, listen, this is going to be our story time. And even if it's half an hour, or sometimes I say that give that 5 minute very undivided attention, and the child will feel that, oh, I got the world. When the child is saying, and we are too busy in our work, and the child is saying that, can I say something? Say, not now, later. I always suggest that leave everything and say, yes, my dear, I'm all yours. Tell me what you want. And they won't take more than 5 minutes of your time because you've given them the world in those 5 minutes. But for the longer issues, if you can create schedules that this is going to be just you and me and our story time or our craft, even though I don't know craft, can you teach me? So if we create even one fun thing during the day, that moment that is just theirs and ours, I would say a lot of cravings would go down because it's more craving for your warmth, your affection, your time that is translating itself into something else.
Absolutely. So, talking about craving for warmth and the emotional tribulations that the children are going through, a lot of it is being passed on from the parent to the child because there's a lot of stress at the workplace. There are wage cuts, there are job cuts. So, sometimes the child gets affected directly. So, for example, I heard of a parent who's not being able to pay her child's monthly fees because she doesn't have a job, and she's willing to do anything, even go to people's houses and get them their groceries. So what impact do you think that might have on the child's mental well-being as well as his or her physical well-being, because it directly affects the child when she cannot pay her school fees or when she's being called out in class for not being able to clear her fees on time. So which of you would like to take that up?
And I can start. It's all right. So I would say that talking to each other is most important right now. None of us have any solutions, and all of us are facing a lot of challenging times. And yes, the child will be heartbroken and they are completely bewildered by what is happening, but we should not underestimate their capability to comprehend, their capability to understand and analyze, because it is happening in their times. This COVID thing is happening in their time. So even if they are 6, 7, 8, if you talk to them continuously every day in whatever soft, gentle manner that you can, and you create a world of your own, and you say that it's all right, we are in this difficult time, but we will sail through. That even though the time is challenging, you and the child are together in it, and you will sail through because nothing lasts forever. and definitely not these difficult times. They are going to last forever. And that is the surety the child needs. That is the security that the child needs. That even if we are in these difficult times, the family is together in it, and we will sail through, and the sun will shine. That's how I look at it.
So if I just add to that as well, that was beautifully put. I think the sun shining is beautifully put. I think at the current time, from a mental well-being perspective and wellness perspective, children of all ages, whether it's a primary, secondary school child, if they hear that their mother is being affected in this way, it's going to be affected in a number of ways. One is that they are being pulled out of school. They are being directly affected. They're not being with their peers. They're not being with their friends. They're going to be worrying about their future. And they will have multiple thoughts going on. Is this my fault? Is this because of something I've done that my mother can't afford this? What will my friends think about me? What will they think about my life? And then also, what impact will this have on me? What does this mean for me as an individual? And that anxiety of not knowing, I think what children are very used to is, in a secure environment, they know they're going to go to school. They can see a daily routine. They know what is happening. And we teach our children that from when they're born. You teach routine as parents. You're taught to give your children a routine. In the COVID pandemic, routine and knowing what is happening and being clear about what is happening has really disappeared. So this is a world, a new way of thinking that children have not really been taught how to deal with. We haven't in schools taught our children about uncertainty. It's always certainty. You work for exams, you work for friends, you behave in a certain way. So uncertainty is something that then brings fear. And what fear brings anxiety. Anxiety brings behavior problems. And anxiety brings emotional problems and physical problems as well, such as not eating, palpitations, other problems. So it has a massive effect on children from their emotional perspective, behavioral perspective, because a child may then find that, like we said about giving children time, if the mother is, I mean, we have a lot of data about how this has affected mothers a lot. The pandemic has affected women a huge amount because they're juggling jobs, they're juggling emotions, they're juggling cooking, cleaning,
yes,
household. It's been a very difficult. So the children pick up on that. The mother's anxious. The positive parenting that we try and do may be very challenging because your own emotions come to the fore. And when all of that happens, it has an impact on the child physically, as I've explained, palpitations, physically, eating, emotionally, and the fear of what does this mean to my mother? They might be seeing the effect on their mother, and they might be seeing the stress on their mother, something they've never seen before either. So I think, Ramanjit's talked very effectively about what can we do about that. And for many parents, talking to your child may be part and parcel of your usual life. For many people, it's not. You feed your children, you tend to send them to school, you do what you do as a good parent. But actually, how much time do we sit and listen to our child? Now, that's really hard at the moment when you have all of these other pressures on top of you. And actually, it does take a bit of a deep breath and to work, if you're with a husband and if you're with grandparents or if you're with any extended family, to actually stop for a bit and think, okay, we've talked about it's okay. It's okay to be upset. And sitting down and giving that child listening time and explaining to that child your emotions, your family dynamics, what is happening, explaining uncertainty, but also explaining the safety net that you are there for them. So whatever is happening, you are there for them. This uncertainty will be supported by the environment they're in. So I think, if anything we talked about today, listening to your children, giving the space for them to talk is one of the most important things that I hope from COVID we will have come out to understand, because we're going to have, we all talk about parents should be good listeners. But I would say that's the top of the list of everything to be really advocating at the moment. Let your child talk, let them listen, let them express their feelings. And if they say something you don't like, they're not trying to be naughty. They're just in a world that was not a world that we were really ready for.
You're completely echoing my thoughts, because exactly what I wrote, that um, listening to your child, or sharing, or talking, I would say talking to your child is healing. So if you are in pain, reach out to your child. It's not always from the parent to the child. There's lots that we receive from children. So exactly what Monica said, that listen to them, and I would say talk to them. If something is ailing you in that child's language, reach out to them, and they will just put in so much faith in you and tell you, it's all right, mama, it will be fine. They have that spiritual journey that is going on inside them, and they are much more courageous than us, because they are not carrying any baggage. So they might be able to in fact heal you. So take out those few minutes to just sit and talk to them.
Absolutely. So, on that note, we have a whole lot of questions coming in from the audience. So, someone asks to Professor Monica that my daughter is only 4 and she's not listening to us. She never used to throw, but now throwing things, shouting. Is it a problem, and do we need to go to a doctor?
Yeah. So she's 4 years. Sorry, I missed some of it. She's 4 years old and she's shouting and throwing things. And, and it's a general question, not just related to the pandemic, I'm presuming. It's a general question. As a general question, it's not something that a doctor would particularly, I think people, often what people look for is this something that's happening to the child? Have they got an illness? Is there something that's wrong with them? Actually, it's about changing the behavior of the child. So the children, it's exactly what Ramanjit was talking about, is about putting in positive behavior and removing negative behavior. So sometimes when children do shout and throw things, they are doing it for attention. It's well known. And developmentally, it's well known. Doctors do assess children for all of these things. But what we always suggest is, let's try and find out when in the day they are doing it, what time of the day they are doing it. Is there something that triggers this off? Is it with one particular parent? Is it with one particular situation? And what is your management strategy when that happens? So sometimes children, particularly at that age, will do it because they are trying to get a message across to you. So they're throwing things, they're doing all of this, creating this havoc around them because they want something from you. And what it is what often happens is it's a trigger for us, just life. It's a trigger for us that we get angry back. So what we tend to suggest to people is, you have to teach yourself in a separate room how to calm down, how not to shout back, because as soon as you raise your voice, as soon as you shout at the child, it's a bit strange things, but they've won. They've won in a way, because that's what they wanted. So what you want to try and do is redesign the whole process so that they get positive feedback and they do good things to get positive feedback for attention, rather than doing negative things for attention. So what we do is we suggest that we use star charts. So if she's 4, actually creating a star chart on the wall where she can see when she's been good, when she can see positive things have happened and she's been rewarded. So it depends where you are and what your environment of accessing people is, but there are lots of behavioral therapists, there are lots of psychologists who can work with parents to support parents through this journey of redesigning how that interaction is between you and the child. The only time we would see a proper medical doctor, probably, usually, is if there are other things been happening. So is it that the child isn't walking properly? Is it that they can't hear? Is it that they can't talk? So some children will throw things and behave in this way because they can't hear very well, and so they can't communicate, or their speech is behind, or they're developmentally delayed in some sort of way. So I think that's the bit where a doctor could review the child. But if the child otherwise is in school, progressing, doing everything they should be doing, in school they behave beautifully, and coming home they're behaving this way, that's when you start thinking, is this because of different situations? So it's useful to sit down now when this child is 4 and not leave it till the child gets older and older. So it's good that the parents have recognized this, and it's good for them to take action. I think I would suggest they take supported action so that they know what to do in a supportive way rather than creating more negativity, and think about, is the child otherwise progressing well? If they're not progressing well in other ways, yes, definitely seek help. But otherwise, I would say behavioral therapist or a psychologist, just to help the parents know how to redesign this whole interaction that's going on.
Yes, yes. So we also have a host of questions coming in from Ramanjit. One of our audience members, she's asking that how difficult was it to work during the lockdown? And another asks you that what is the right age to start theatre? So if you could please answer those two.
Well, as the Creative Arts is an 18-year-old institute delving deep into theatre training, systematic theatre training for children and adults, and we have introductory, beginners, intermediate, and advanced course. So basically, they do theatre throughout their schooling years. So this long experience gave us enough time and analysis of what would be the right age, and we have observed that age 5, 5 years old are the ones who start responding to a systematic learning. There was a time when we started it for 4 years old, but it didn't work because their attention span isn't there, and they need to be just left on their own with a little bit of coaxing here or there, storytelling and fun stuff. But systematic theatre training should be good, or we should start it around age 5. That should be good, and it should become your lifestyle because it helps you throughout your life. Theatre helps you throughout your life. That is one passion like reading that everyone must develop. And talking about how difficult it was working online during COVID, well, as I said, that it was challenging for us to redesign stuff for children, but once we got onto that journey, it has been very exciting, and children look forward to it. The reason is that the school exercises or any other classes, you're receiving, and you're supposed to do it in that manner. But when you are doing theater or any other this kind of art form, you're creating. So you're also giving. There's something going from you to outside, and it is your creation. So your whole mind, body, and heart is involved in it. So it becomes very healing. So in fact, I would say that our work in the art world has been a big blessing. So it's not been very difficult working online because we've been trying to fight this online fatigue through a lot of physicality and craziness. But I would say that it's been a blessing that we have an art form in which we are dealing, and this encompasses anyway all the art forms of music, dance, craft. We've been making puppets and all kinds of stuff. So it's been quite joyful actually, and it's helped us survive these difficult times. And we've been able to bond all over the world. The summer workshops had people from all over India, and now Dramebazi has people from all over the world with whom we are bonding. So that's another matter of great joy, that so many different people we've reached out to and we are able to share our thoughts and feelings with and interact with. So yes, it's on the contrary, it's been quite all right. It's been our survival tool, in fact.
Yeah, we also have two questions coming in for Professor Monica again, one from a parent and one from a grandparent. So the parent asks, I have two children, but their difference is 9 years, and we were facing trouble meeting their needs. The elder one is 12 years and playing too much games, and some games are not of his age. But I can't stop downloading as he can do it on his own. So children are very, very technologically advanced now, and we don't really need to help them out. And the grandparent is also very concerned because the child is spending a lot of time on social media instead of really interacting with the family.
Yeah, so the question is, it comes back to screen time and screen protection and safety. So generally, there is a lot of concern from parents, and rightly so, that we have to be careful, one, of screen time, and one of what children are actually seeing, whether it's social media, whether it's games. It doesn't. But what are they actually accessing? So from the position of social media or digital time, if we talk about screen time, there are negatives and positives. So the positive is that we know that without some digital engagement, children will be even more isolated and children will become quite lonely. And so I think firstly, it's a sit down with the child to find out how long they are having screen time, what they're doing with that screen time. And I think it's permissible really during these difficult times that we're going to have a bit more flexibility than we would have otherwise, because of the loneliness that other children would have. The second question is, if they're not doing that, what alternative do we give them? So we're talking about the fact that we're not happy, which we don't want the child to be on social media all the time, but what alternative are we going to give them? So I think we have to come with an offer to the child. So the offer is, I don't want you to be on social media. I don't want you to be playing your PlayStation all the time or your digital games all the time. During this time when you're not doing that, we are going to do this together. So a bit like Ramanjit was saying about theatre, what can they do instead? Can they do creative arts? Can they do theatre? Can they do exercise in the house with you? Can they do cooking? Can they bake with you? Can they do something together with you that you would not otherwise have done? So this is a partnership, and I think that's what sometimes people forget, is that it's a partnership. If you just come to a child during lockdown and say, sorry, I'm taking your phone away, I'm not going to let you see your friends, I'm not letting you on social media, it's unrealistic. And once you're unrealistic, you get a bounce back from children. They will bounce back and say, well, actually, why? Why are you taking it away if you have nothing else you can offer me? Okay. The other thing is, it's actually, we're on digital media now, and we are on it all day long, and we know that, and that is reality. So we also can't give mixed messages. It's okay for us, but it's not okay for them, okay? So if we're going to do this partnership approach, yes, I'm going to stop my digital media, you stop your digital media. We are going to have an hour a day, well, more than that, hopefully, but certain times during the day, well, none of us will be on that. And this is an agreement between everybody. Dinner time, no phone, no time. The monitoring is more difficult. The monitoring comes down to the fact that there are systems you can put on computers. There are definitely downloadable systems that you can put on computers so that you can block certain downloads and age restrict. I think it's about searching for the one that you can utilize and put on the computer. So there are definitely things out there to protect children. And there will be, there are safety mechanisms, and that's actually really important. It is important to ensure through digital platforms your children are safe. People are not accessing them that shouldn't be accessing them. People are not giving them violent games that they shouldn't be seeing at certain ages. That means that you have to put those mechanisms in place. And it comes back to this thing of just shouting at children, telling them off never works. It just doesn't. We can try and be authoritarian. We can try and be, I'm going to tell my child to do X, Y, Z. It's not going to work. They're going to either hide and do it, or they're going to find another way of doing it. Agreeing, partnership, working together, flexibility, coming to a joint decision. It's a new way of parenting for many people, but actually it's the only way that's going to succeed.
Yes. So I have two winding questions because we are at the end of our program for today. So one thing I think is that a lot of children are being forced to attend school. Some of them are being forced, some of them want to, of course, to attend school on digital media. And some of them have access, many don't, and they're falling behind. They're scared that they will not get adequate access to the digital media once once things get back to normal and they have to go back to school, they're going to fall behind. So there are all sorts of fears coming in. Those who do have access to the digital media, some of them are losing concentration, and probably, classes are going on and they're just asleep or they are doing something else while the teacher is teaching. So one thing is whether the education system is, yes, so actually the question here is that whether the education system is actually helping children or is it making the situation a little more difficult for them? That's the first question. And the second question is from the audience. He asks whether it is right to be scared for the times when they will go back to school and they will be exposed to children who have a lot of varying degrees of experiences, because our experiences are not the same during the situation. And so there might be children who have gone through more traumatic experiences, and whether that is likely to have a negative impact on the children who are going back maybe with not so bad experiences. So yeah, I would like maybe the both of you to answer both the questions, because we are right at the end, and with a few concluding comments, we'll come to the end of the session.
Okay.
So I would say that these are extremely important questions, because education rules our life, which it shouldn't. So I always say that what is our purpose of life? Is our purpose to get educated, then get a job, then make a career, then earn money? Was that the purpose with which we came to this life? I would say no, because the nature sent us to this earth with another purpose, and that purpose was to fulfill something that nature wanted us to do. But how do we find such a huge philosophy of life? That's the question. And I would say let's relook at education, not just now, post COVID-19, forever and ever. Then both these questions will be answered. And that is, we need to understand ourselves first, understand nature first. We need to understand, why are we studying? We are studying because people before us deducted, analyzed few things which they've already done, so we don't need to go back to Stone Age. But we can use these tools that were accumulated before we came. We can study them, have some basic knowledge to survive in life. But apart from that, our 50% of our job, right from the pre-nursery, should be to know this person, to know ourselves, to know the nature. Now, how are we going to do it? And that is the task of us educationists and people who are working towards it, is to find the tools, the ways, the means, the exercises to create that 50% within the education system, which helps the individual to know themselves, which makes the individual reach that understanding of what is my purpose in life. And slowly, as you understand that, all these issues get solved. If in COVID-19 situation you are locked down, you are unable to study the way you should have, or the way things should have moved, let's relook at it. The schools must look at how much are they giving to their children. Why do they need to feed all social studies lessons or history lessons or science lessons? It can be slow paced. It can be so much fun. It can be just songs and storytelling. Why can't the whole system change for 1 year? And which is all right. Nothing would stop and nothing would fall apart. Things will fall apart if we put so much stress that we have to complete 10 chapters and we have to know this much maths. It's not important. And also post COVID-19, yes, there'll be children who've had some very traumatic experience, who've gone through a lot of stress, even if there was no real trauma, but the whole trauma of being locked up or what the child went through, and they'll be thrown together. Why should we be scared? We anyway come from very different situations every day in life. Do you think when we are together in school or offices, we have similar situations? No, we have very varied situations that we are fighting. In the end, everyone is fighting a situation. That's why empathy. The question is that when we come back and a lot of stress is given on storytelling, empathy, talking to each other, conversing with each other, we will be looking at a healed world. We will be looking at a lot of healing. We will be looking at creating a lot of love and happiness. I think those should be our goals, and not these chapters that have been written ruthlessly. That's what I have to say.
That's beautiful. Just to build on that, I think one realization for many people is this: we talk about COVID or the end of COVID-19. The reality is this is a long-term issue. It's not going to just suddenly go away. And I think we have to be prepared for that. So thinking, oh, well, children will be going back to school, what will happen when they go back to school, as though it's a chapter and a closed chapter. It's not. This is something we are going to have to live with for a very long time, either because of what's been happening or because in the future, or because there are future spikes of and waves of this pandemic. So I think the first thing is appreciating this is not a one-off situation. The second thing is appreciating that children are very resilient, very, very resilient. Children have lived through wars, they have lived through being migrants, they have lived through being in very, very difficult circumstances. And we know from people we know ourselves, our parents or our many other generations who've traveled the world or been part of very conflict situations, that children are very resilient, okay? But what does make resilience? Resilience comes from within. And so I think if anything that we or the education should be doing is working together to consider how do we build resilience in children? And if we create children who are resilient, who can think, who are empathetic, who talk to each other, who are not frightened about uncertainty and change, then we have children who can live through the things the parent was talking about is, should I be scared when they go back? I think it's not about being scared when they're going back. It's about preparing children for when they go back, that they will be different experiences, and be considerate about those differences. Listen to your friends. If there are things that you feel uncomfortable about, come and talk to us. Schools will have a big role in this. There will be schools and teachers who will need to pick up these conversations. They will need to listen out for these conversations, and they will need to provide a space for children to have conversations, whether it's direct conversation or through theatre or drawings or all the things we talked about today. So I think teachers will have a very key role in the future ahead for how these children, for our future, develop. And they will need the teachers and family support for that. The second thing I think they were talking about is, what about this, our schools doing the right thing or the wrong thing? And it would be wonderful to live in a world where it wasn't all about exams and books and all the rest of it. And that's what we would love for our children. And the reality of life, unfortunately, with just
we have to bring the world to that if we want it to be a happy space. In the next 50 years, maybe.
I know. I think just answering the individual's question was, as where our schools, is this something that's been inflicted on children, and is it an issue? I think, well, again, it comes back to there will be variation in the education children have had while they've been out of school. The key is that variation doesn't become a pressure on the child. I think there are huge pressures on children now for education, which then we do know that children do have lots of mental health problems because of the pressure of exams and top marks and all the rest of things. And now with the divide in some people who are in schools which have been more interactive and schools who haven't been able to be providing the learning that's required, that divide could be even bigger. What we don't want children to feel is it's their fault, or they've done something wrong, or they're not good enough. We just have to be so careful that we do not put added pressure on our children, that if for some reason they have fallen behind, and again, fallen behind in what way, but the terminology is what people use, that through the school curriculum and agenda, they are not felt to be under such pressure that it actually puts their wellness at risk. And I think that is key. We have very, very vulnerable children at the moment, and we need to recognize their vulnerability. And we need to recognize that this is a global problem, and there will be some more vulnerable than others, but every single child is vulnerable in some sort of way. So we need to think differently, come together, recognize the signs, listen to each other, and be there to support each other.
Listening to each other should be the key in these times, not only for the children, but also for adults, because it is a very difficult time that we are going through. We need to hear each other out, no matter what happens. I have one question from Dr. Indrani Lahiri, and she wants me to ask you whether theatre can make any positive messages to children, and in what way will the messages work in making this world a better place? So if Ramanjit, you could just take this up as a final comment.
Thank you, Indrani, and thank you for hosting this. This is a very important question. And yes, as I said, that theater, why should you make theater as your lifestyle or a part of your life, is because theater is answering questions for you all the time. Because we are indulging in storytelling, we are indulging in a lot of sharing and bonding, we are indulging in role playing. So supposing I'm a very meek person, and I don't know how to shout or scream or be aggressive, but I might do a role play which is of an aggressive person. So one, that I'm there's a vent out. Two, I also feel how it feels to be an aggressive person, and I'm dealing with so many things within myself. And when we deal with issues in theater, that is, let's say, I mean, at the creative arts, we've dealt with the Sundarbans issue, the environment issues, a whole lot of environment issues, and one was Snow White and the Saline Curse. So we interwove a fairy tale with the Sundarbans issue. The mangroves are dying and they are going through a saline curse, and we interwove it with Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and called it Snow White and the Saline Curse. In the same way, we interwove Tasher Desh to show play within a play. So when the children are rehearsing Tasher Desh, we explode their peer pressure, their educational pressure, their relationships, growing up years, problems of growing up, and education system, and how parents and children interact and what it means. So it was a whole world over there. So you are getting a lot of messages. You're kind of trying to resolve and solve and analyze for yourself when you're dealing in theater. Then came the immigration issue that has been so big in the past few years. So from tiny dots to all the big ones, we talked about While We Go Sailing, which was written by my co-curator of Dramebazi, Vishali Chatterjee. So we talked about the whole immigration issue and we created a piece around that. So there were a lot of messages within that, messages of inclusiveness, messages of leaving your land. Then again, freedom. Let's say, I mean, I was just talking to a teacher from La Martinia for Girls, Kolkata. There was an assignment, and I said, let not Independence Day be just independence of India. How about talking about freedom? What does freedom mean to you? What does freedom mean to each child? Does it mean just sitting and doing nothing? Does it mean not studying? Does it mean just playing? Does it mean just doing craft? There are days when my younger one will just do craft. She just would not want to do homework. So she wants that freedom. For her, freedom is that where no one is telling her that you cannot do craft for 1 week and not do anything else. So what does freedom mean to you? Because theater gives you that space to question, to address that issue, to address social issue, personal issue, relationship issues. It also gives you space to create stories around it, read literature about it. It also gives you space to understand others. What do others think about it, the perspective? And then it gives you space to create things around it. So yes, it gives you a whole canvas to live that world or live that question, not only not only literary or orally, but also physically, emotionally, in every which way, and creatively, and to find an answer or analyze it for yourself if there's any issue that we are talking about. So yes, messages galore. It is a world full of messages for you. It's a whole world in itself. It embraces the whole universe.
And I think just picking on that from the health side, I think more and more, so I do my own research, and more, rather than just keeping the research in journals and publications that probably very few people will ever read, we are engaging much more with our colleagues in theatre as a way of trying to translate the information we're learning through science and getting the messages out there into the public, and even health promotion messages. So if we're talking about healthy eating or diabetes or heart disease, or for children, what is it like with a disability? Now, this is a way of giving a voice to individuals. So we're working with some women living in temporary accommodation at the moment, homeless women, and who have young children. We're taking their narrative stories into theatre. How can we share their stories through theatre to a wider audience? How can professionals like me and my colleagues, doctors and nurses and other therapists, understand what it's really like to live? So the lived experiences of people. Again, sometimes it's understandable. If you're an individual and you're talking to somebody who you consider to be a professional, that divide is often there. And you can't fully understand what the lived experiences of those individuals in front of you. Bringing together, using a way of bringing together professionals, people with lived experiences, is a wonderful way to overcome a lot of those barriers. And also, particularly, we talked a lot today about mental wellness. Mental wellness is a very sensitive area globally, and people don't talk about it. So again, talking about utilizing theatre as a platform to talk about never voice. We can't talk about the stigma around living with a mental health illness, whether it's with children or adults or women and the lives, the pressures that they live through, or being a parent of somebody with a challenging child or somebody with a disability. All of those very difficult conversations that we might have normally, theatre can be a wonderful space for not only the patients or the families or the children in school, but also for professionals closer to the families that we work with. So
yes,
I think
yes, absolutely. We have had a wonderful session, because of which Dr. Indrani has just given us 20 extra minutes. So I think we are enjoying this as much as the audience is. And I have a question for Ramanjit, that in these trying times, we have to rely on digital theatre. In the absence of a stage to go back to, it's digital theatre that we have to keep relying on. So how does that work? Do you think that has the same kind of effectiveness as physical theatre? And whether it will have a therapeutic effect on children as well as adults?
No, I mean, definitely it cannot be compared to the physical touch. If I have to hug someone, I have to hug someone. And as I said, that let's reach out. But it is still this, and I'm trying to negotiate with this screen and trying to gauge your energy across the space, but it is still not touch. So the real energy of the audience and the actor, the vibes that flow when you're performing in front of an audience and when there are people in a real manner, just like the life isn't the same, when we are sitting in front of screens, theater isn't the same at all. Having said that, life is all about rising up to the challenges, and making the most of it, making the most of whatever moment you are living, because we don't know whether we're going to have the next moment or not. So is this moment going to be beautiful, or at least am I going to live it to my best capability? That is the question. So theater, yes, online, it is not the same, but it is very, very healing, not only for children, but also for adults, because it gives you a whole lot of canvas, it gives you a whole lot of possibilities of engaging with so many issues that you're dealing with right now. In fact, people who've never thought of doing theater should think about indulging in it if there are any workshops that are coming up, or people are doing interesting work, because in Dramebazi itself there are 20 events and so many artists have created such beautiful work. I was talking to Lee Thompson from UK, he's a puppeteer, and he creates these really cute puppetry songs, and for Dramebazi he created 2 original ones, one on environment and one on empathy. And I sit at night and I just look at that video. It's a very short video, but it just fills my heart with so much love. So So many artists have created so many different things, which will make you heal, make you laugh, make you cry some positive tears. And also when you are yourself indulging, you're addressing a lot of issues within you, and you're also having a lot of fun. You're making your body move. There is exercise, there is emotion, there is expression, there is sharing, there is bonding, there's a lot of fighting, there's a lot of mess that me and my team is going through right now. So yeah, I mean, it's not real life, but it is the best thing next to real life. That's how I would put it.
And just
Yes.
to say that there's the positive side is that there are many people in the world who may not have been able to access theatre. And one positive thing of it's not the same. I agree, it's not the same. But actually what it has done is open up the world. The digital platform has opened up the world to people who otherwise may not have been able to access it.
Completely.
Yeah.
We've had so many people who just said that, oh, I've been wanting to do this, I've been wanting to do this. And yes, you're absolutely right.
So we hope that going forward, this will have brought a number of people together.
Yes.
So going forward, you know, we want to work across sectors more effectively. We have to. If we're going to have all these very complex problems in the world, we've talked about environment, we've talked about health, we've talked about the arts. If we really want to solve, or solve is wrong, engage with some of these very, very complex difficulties and problems and that we are facing, we have to work together. And what this session has already done is brought Ramanjit and me together, the creative arts and the science together on one platform.
Yes.
There's real positive ways of us engaging using the digital platform through theatre, through health, through the arts, through environment, different ways. And hopefully this, through, they always say there's always a silver lining, isn't there? So through a very difficult period where we've all had to think of different ways of working, it may have actually brought many of us together who may have otherwise lived in our little compartments, doing what we were doing for a very long time, but we've had to break some of those boundaries and barriers. And if that's going to help us all think differently, it's definitely been worth it.
I'll just quickly share two very interesting examples. In fact, while listening to Monica, it came to my mind. One was an environment project that I did with 20 girls from La Martiniere for Girls, Kolkata. Was, first we made them write about nature. What do they think of when we say the word nature? What is their relationship with it? How will they look at it post COVID-19? And what would they like to do with it? When we talk about empathy, how will you reach out? So these are problems that parents and children are already finding. If you go and an activity like theater, it already asks you. So it's all a lot of stuff. So we kind of ask the children, do you help your mother? Do you do stuff around the house? So this whole thing, it became a beautiful environment of during biodiversity. But just the exploration of watering plants, feeding the fish in the pond, we have fish in the pond, having around, washing clothes, cleaning utensils. We have all of this kind of video. The books have a blast because you're creating this beautiful project and negotiating with this very
There seems to be a bit of an audio problem, I think. So there is one final question that I have for Professor Monica. And there is someone from the audience who is asking about nightmare children. And he says that a lot of children...
I didn't hear, sorry, asking about
nightmares in children. There are a lot of children who are facing nightmares, especially now because of the entire thing that is going on. And how do we tackle that? And what do we exactly say to make them feel better about themselves and the world?
Yeah. So, I mean, exactly as you said, the children have nightmares because of fears that they hold within them. So we've talked a lot about children's anxieties and fears and not knowing what is going on. And what children do is then they absorb, they're like sponges. They absorb all the information. And we may think they're not listening, but if you're in a lockdown house, they are listening to everything. So they may be listening to things you've told them directly, but they're hearing every single conversation that happens around them. That then gets into their wonderfully active brains, and they express that through nightmares. So during the two things that needs to be done is, one is obviously if a child is having a nightmare at that time, they need comfort. The first thing is the child needs comfort and reassurance. Make sure they're feeling well, give them some water, calm them down. So consider how you're going to, and talk between parents about how you are going to make them feel reassured. It may be that at that time you have to consider whether it's the right time or not the right time to ask them what the nightmare was about. But the key first is, do they feel safe? What children want to feel is they want to feel secure, they want to feel less anxious, they want to feel safe. So a child wakes up in the middle of the night, they're shaking, calm them down, comfort them, give them some water, make them feel warm. Sometimes giving them something to hold, like a teddy or a special blanket or something like that, again, gives them a comfort. The other thing is that we use is lights. So put a small light on. So if it's a child who's having a lot of nightmares, put a small light on in the room. So it's one of these evening lights that you can put on. Darkness can sometimes make children feel very alone, and it can sometimes make children feel very scared at the moment, particularly, never mind any other time. So the environment that your child sleeps in, consider that. Is there anything on the walls? Is there anything giving shadows? Is there anything creating more fear to the child? Second is the noise. Sometimes when you're asleep, if you have a lot of weird noises outside, that can add to your fear factor and add to your nightmares. So consider what is it? Try and put yourself in that child's shoes. What is it that you're hearing that may actually be affecting the way your brain is hearing things? So people do use what we call white noise, just to drown out the other noise. And you can get appliances that play white noise. So 3 things I've said. When the child wakes up, environment that the child sleeps, lighting in the room, and comfort. So something that they can hold on to if they're feeling anxious. Then during the day, sit down with the child. Try and identify if there are things that are troubling them. And that's going to be the key at undoing. So one thing is the immediate impact and dealing with that. But then it's where are these nightmares coming from? What is happening? Let's talk, let the child express. Children often have nightmares because they're holding feelings within them. When they feel safe to say to their family and their parents what they're really thinking, when they feel that there won't be repercussions because of what they say, they can start releasing some of that stress from within them. And we all know as well, we talk a lot about mindfulness, children's yoga, children's meditation. And it's a reality that, we are finding that if children engage with some of these different, more calming activities such as yoga and mindfulness, that also has a very positive effect on their sleep pattern.
I would add to that, Indrani has just messaged me to talk about digital theater also. Yes, I've been talking about a lot of projects, involving a lot of space, and I have seen quite a few shows which are using digital theater in terms of producing things in front of the screen by changing the backdrop, creating stuff around what we are experiencing and performing it here. And while we are performing it, using a lot of effects that people can figure out, sound effects or visuals or things like that. So yes, there's this whole world that can become very exciting. Having said that, I also feel that let's just make this digital theater also very interesting. Let's use props. I mean, the other day I had to perform, for senior batted series. So, in fact, it was by Baldeep Singh Ji, who's one of the biggest musicologists, one of the biggest in the world of ancient music and compositions in Gurbani Sangeet. So it was his batted, which is a 100 batted series that he's doing. So we did not restrict ourselves to, sitting and doing theater like this. So I just moved the laptop away, created space for myself, and I used enough properties and movements and chakras that I would in real life, if I was performing in real life. So if you're creating theater for digital space, also do not restrict yourself. Anita Ratnam Ji asked us to create something for her boxed series. So I performed under the dining table, and my daughters Ruhani and Amira had created a whole world of small toys and dining table things and plates under the table. So I used that whole movement to create something for digital space. So do not restrict your imagination thinking that this is the screen and this is where I have to perform. Just move the screen a little back and take this whole space the way you would in reality. Apart from that, if you're working in this one and you want to work with technology, there are like 1 million things that you can explore over here. So go ahead, be creative, and keep smiling.
Thank you so much, both of you, for joining us this evening. This has been a wonderful session, and I hope the audience has also enjoyed this. I think one thing that we will take back from this session is that these are difficult times. These are very, very unforeseen circumstances, but there is a lot to do here. We just don't sit back at home and get depressed about it. There is a lot to do about it because it is hope and it is the feeling of togetherness that is going to take us, that is going to make us sail through these times. There is a silver lining. There is always a silver lining because under normal, so-called normal circumstances, I don't see this happening. I don't see three people from three different places across the world meeting here and becoming friends. Not so easily, absolutely. So there are good things happening even in very bad times, and we have to focus on that. We have to talk to one another. It's very important we do that. We also meet tomorrow for a session at 8:30 in India and 4 p.m. in UK. It is a 1-hour program where we come together with a lot of performers from across the community, and they create a space for themselves where they express and they communicate with one another, which is the one thing that we really need to do during these times. We also meet next Friday where we have Celebrate Our Similarities, where we will be hearing very real life stories and coping mechanisms. So please join us tomorrow as well as next week. Thank you very much for watching us this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shinjini. Thank you, Montfort University and Manav Utsav, Indrani Lahiri. And thanks to all of you. Thank you, Monica. It's a pleasure being with you on this panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.